Namaskar. Kasakai, Mumbai. मुझे Mumbai, magical Mumbai में आकर बहुत खुशी हुई. It's a great honor on behalf of the United Nations to be here with you tonight. Honored to share a stage with so many superheroes assembled in this crowd, making real change in so many different fields: healthcare, business, nutrition, film, mindfulness. Especially pleased to be here with you, the young change makers, but also those with gray hair, like mine, wo jo dil se young hai. We are all in this fight together. On behalf of the United Nations and India, it's a great honor and pleasure that we have been able to partner with the Young Changemakers Conclave now for a decade. Changemakers, change. We're here to talk about this word, change. And boy, have we all gone through a lot of it, especially in the last 2 years. But none more than you, the young people gathered from across all corners of India. As in countries across the world, the pandemic has changed everything. The way you studied, as your schools, universities were forced to shut their doors, the way you worked, as many of us have had to switch to working from home, others less fortunate, bearing the brunt of job losses. It has changed the way that you interact with your friends. The very basis for social connections had become virtual and limited. Ties were lost. Everyone faced fear, pain, and uncertainty. The pandemic impacted everyone everywhere, but young people felt it deeply and disproportionately. And while we can all rejoice in the fact that here we are together in person again, it is still too early to claim victory on the pandemic. Transformational technologies like artificial intelligence are triggering a revolution also in the way that we work, in the way that we govern, in the way that we interact with each other. But are we doing enough to make sure that this technological advancement also benefits the most vulnerable? That we leave no one behind? That we are not increasing inequalities and the digital divide? And the ties that bind us across countries, across the world, multilateralism, are being stretched, are being damaged, are changing rapidly. Yet we face so many conflicts across the world: Syria, Yemen, and now the worst war and refugee crisis in Europe since the Second World War has erupted, as we see both enormous human cost, and we see that the world is facing rapidly increasing inflation from fuel, from food, hydrocarbon, and carbohydrates. For the first time in 30 years, global human development has faced deep setbacks. We are facing together a triple planetary crisis: biodiversity loss, rising levels of air and water pollution, and of course, climate change. The Secretary General of the United Nations recently described the latest Intergovernmental Panel report on climate change, calling its findings an atlas of human suffering and a damning indictment of failed climate leadership. The people of Mumbai, of course, know all too well the impacts of climate change, of rising intolerable heat waves, of severe flooding that push the resilience of cities along coastal areas across the world to their limits. You, as the young people, know the challenges that we face: gender discrimination, exclusion from jobs, inequality, wasteful, unsustainable consumerism. And you also know the answers. Nari Shakti, of course, being one of the most important. So the need, colleagues, for global cooperation to solve these challenges has never been more clear. Change is inevitable, but how we choose to grow and develop, this is our choice. As Charles Darwin famously said in The Survival of the Fittest, fittest does not mean the strongest. It is actually the species who are best able to adapt. And the good news is, colleagues, that we have a roadmap to adapt towards a safer, more resilient, and inclusive society. The 2030 Agenda, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. These goals include eradicating poverty, hunger, tackling climate change, delivering gender equality. These goals are for you, the young people, and they will be achieved by you. In fact, here in India, it has been said that half of the global SDG targets live in India. So you, the young Indians of today, you are the biggest youth generation in the world ever. You will determine what our world looks like in the future. This may seem scary, but you have the power to deliver on that opportunity. India is, of course, increasingly an innovation economy and leader, one that has lessons for the rest of the world. And I am talking about the youth again in particular. Your amazing apps, your incredible social innovation models, your 1,300 tech startups each year, your disruptive ideas for the fourth industrial revolution, circular fashion for a green future. You are leading the way. And you have now been heroes also of this pandemic. As community volunteers and helpers, you have shown time and time again you are ready for the challenge, be it pandemic, be it climate action. So many examples I have been inspired by, including a young Archana Soreng, a tribal girl from Orissa, who now advocates tirelessly to bring indigenous perspectives to the global climate discourse, not just here, but internationally. She is one example of the many inspiring young people offering innovative solutions. And this morning, I began the morning with the great opportunity to join Afroz Shah and his army of volunteers at Warsaw Beach, not far from here, to join the world's largest beach cleanup campaign in the world, a local hero making a global impact, and as a result named UN Earth Champion and inspiring the UN Environment Program Clean Seas campaign globally. So when we look at the scale of the change that we need to achieve the SDGs, it can seem rather daunting. What can I as a person do to end poverty when over 700 million people globally are poor? What can I do to solve hunger when 800 million people are hungry? How can I stop millions of tons of carbon emissions each year? Well, as I learned, one Afroz Shah has already helped clean 65 million kgs of plastic waste, making the oceans clean for our health, for our livelihoods. And that's the point. No individual alone can solve these challenges, but we must all think globally, act locally, and collectively. When over 300 million young people in India take mindful steps in their communities, driving behavioral change, we can do amazing things. This is, of course, the spirit of Prime Minister Modi's proposal at the recent COP26 to launch a whole-of-society behavioral transformation campaign called LIFE. And in this case, the ambition is 1.3 billion people in India taking mindful steps to save the planet, amplified by India's ambitious Panchamrit commitments along the way. So dear young change makers, let me conclude in saying that I am very optimistic that our future is bright in your hands. And let me recommit the United Nations in India's ambition to work with you along the way. And we are currently about to conclude our next 5-year UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, our partnership offer with India. And you, the young people of India, are at the core of our hopes and our ambitions. मुझे आप सबसे मिलकर बहुत अच्छा लगा. धन्यवाद.